Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Welcome to Gold and Blue today, everybody. This is a college football channel. So if you like college football, hit the like and subscribe button. It's that simple. Also, send gear to represent your team and be a part of my background forever. All you have to do is send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Ugly fight takes place in the tunnel at Michigan Stadium after the Michigan State-Michigan game. Of course, Michigan did win that game 29-7. I don't know the actual specifics of this as far as what started this. What I'm hearing is that one or two players separated from the team and went and talked trash to Michigan State, and they got beat up. So from what I'm hearing, the rest of the team was still out on the field celebrating, and then these two morons went down to where Michigan State was going into the tunnel and started a fight. What happened after that is truly not good at all. This is not what college football needs. So here are the actual facts that I know right now. Two Michigan players were assaulted by pretty much half of the Michigan State team. There was a lot of players involved. And one of those assaults was actually caught on camera. And if you go back and watch the assault, it's really crazy because there were security guards and even state troopers, and they did nothing. What's the point of having security and police officers if they're going to stand around and do nothing? I mean, were they scared of this situation? There were no weapons involved. I mean, it was just basically some punching and some stomping. You have to intervene. At some point, you have to intervene. Maybe whenever the camera went off, they intervened, but I thought it caught the conclusion of the fight, and I saw no intervention either from security or the police. So that needs to be figured out right now. Here's what the Michigan Athletic Director, Ward Manuel, said. I talked to the commissioner, and he's looking into it. The police are also looking into it. We'll leave it in their hands, but this is not how we should interact after the game. That's not the way another team should grab a player and do what they did. It's completely and utterly unacceptable. We will let the Big Ten and law enforcement handle it, but this is not what a rivalry should be about. It's not how it should be remembered, and I agree with that. And the Michigan State president said unacceptable. Those are the only words that I have from the Michigan State president. So this is ridiculous. This is not the first time this has happened at Michigan Stadium. And here's the problem. There's only one tunnel, and all the players come in and out. There's not a separate visitor tunnel, and there's not a separate home tunnel. It's all the same. That's a big problem. And there's been two previous brawls that have been documented, an Ohio State-Michigan brawl and a Penn State-Michigan brawl, and it was in the tunnel. That tunnel is a problem. You got to remember, these are young adults. They're still trying to figure out how to make good decisions. That's why guidance is very important in these situations. This should never happen. But remember, they just played a war out on the football field where they were actually hitting each other legally within the bounds of the rules. And now, after the game, two of the players from Michigan decide to exit the team, go to the tunnel, run their mouth, and then they get assaulted by the Michigan State players. I think both sides were at fault here. The two Michigan players should not have separated from the team and go badmouth the Michigan State players. But on top of that, the Michigan State players shouldn't have reacted the way they did. This is a problem, and it's got to stop. So I think there needs to be a separate tunnel for the visitors and the home. You can keep the tunnel for the home team because I know they're used to that entrance, but you need to create a separate entrance for the visitors because this is not good. This is going to keep happening if you don't do that. So players will be held accountable. It looks like law enforcement is getting involved as well. So there could be charges pressed on these players. And if you look at the actual camera footage of this fight, yes, this was an assault. This was a gang assault. This wasn't a one-on-one. This wasn't even a 2-on-1. It looked like a 15-on-1, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm a little bit exaggerating. Maybe it was a 10-on-1, 8-on-1. I don't know. But it was way too many players on one player. Those players should have known better to go and trash talk after a rivalry game, especially splitting off from the team. You're supposed to celebrate as a team. So you took it upon yourself to go trash talk away from your own team. You're not even celebrating. You're just going to start trouble. And then it was a bad reaction on the part of the Michigan State players. So we'll see if there's any charges that's going to be put forth on these Michigan State players. I don't know how many players would be charged. I'm not sure how many were actually involved in this fight. But this got ugly. This got really, really ugly. And we all know, if you're old enough, we all know some big fights that we saw. One of the biggest ones that I remember was FIU and Miami. I think it was back in 2003, 2004, something like that. Man, that was a crazy fight. I think there were several players that got charged in that fight. So you just can't do that. Yes, on the field, whenever you're hitting within the rules, it's acceptable. It's part of football. But when you get off the field and you start throwing punches, that's not acceptable at all. I mean, if you're on the field and throw a punch, guess what? It's not acceptable. So if you get off the field, guess what? It's not going to be acceptable. So these young men need to learn to make better decisions and not act in the heat of the moment. But also the coaches need to do a better job of teaching these individuals to make better decisions, because they are at a point in their life where they're learning to make good decisions. Yes, they are technically adults, but they are very, very young adults, and they're still going to make bad decisions. So they need good leadership from the coaching. That way this doesn't happen. But I think it comes down to that tunnel. The tunnel is a bad idea for both teams to come in and come out and have to go to their separate locker rooms through one tunnel. The locker rooms are separate, but they have to enter those locker rooms through one tunnel. This is common sense. Think about it. Why would you do that? Especially in rivalry games? Are you kidding me? They're having to walk shoulder to shoulder out of the game. Now, in this particular situation, that didn't happen. Michigan was still celebrating out on the field, but two players broke off and went into the tunnel and started a fight. So the question for me is, would a separate tunnel prevent this particular fight? Because if you think about it, and this just came to my mind, if these two players separated from their team, went to the tunnel, trash talked, and got their butts kicked, can you really blame that on the tunnel? Would they have done it still if there was a separate tunnel for the visitors? This isn't, the two teams were walking back to their locker rooms at the same time and a fight broke out. No. Two players broke off from the team and went and talked trash. So in this particular situation, maybe a separate tunnel wouldn't have solved the problem. But there's no way around it. It is a bad idea to have one tunnel, and there's only one way in and one way out for these teams to enter and exit the field. It is a bad idea. I don't think it would have prevented this fight, because it seemed like that those two players were just dead set on making a bad decision. And then the Michigan State players reacted in a bad way. So hopefully Jim Harbaugh gets onto those players and say, no, you can't separate from, number one, you celebrate as a team. Number two, you can't separate and go look for trouble. You're not condoning what Michigan State did, but don't go out and seek trouble. That's always a bad recipe. So hopefully he sits down with those two players and say, you can't do that again. Look what happened. And then, of course, there's probably going to be some charges brought down on the Michigan State players. We'll see what happens with that as well. But there's no place in college football for this. I understand it's a heated rivalry, and one team just basically bullied the other team on the field. So maybe the visiting team wanted to get their bullying off the field. I don't condone it, though. I don't condone it at all. It is unacceptable. I'm just trying to figure out the rationale as to why this happened. That way in the future we can prevent things like this happening, because you don't want to see an assault like this. Assaults like this, they just shouldn't happen. So we'll see who will be held accountable, what charges will be brought, if there are going to be any charges brought, and I guess we'll go from there. So y'all let me know in the comment section. Number one, are you okay with only one tunnel and only one way to go in and out of the stadium for both teams? Number two, do you think that a separate tunnel would have prevented this possible assault? And number three, if you watched the video of the assault, what was your opinion on the reaction of the security guards and the police officers? I didn't see any reaction at all. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.